See you then.
23 minutes to 7.
The murder of Stephen Lawrence in London 18 years ago and the subsequent failings of the police investigation shocked Britain and changed the criminal justice system too.
Well, 2 men were finally found guilty yesterday, but even though the killing was an unprovoked racist attack, David Norris and Gary Dobson are expected to get relatively short sentences later. With us this morning is Barrister Felicity Gerry, who can tell us why. Good morning.
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 And this is because, I mean, they were aggravating. It was an aggravated attack. So why would they get you're expected to get a life sentence, but the tariff will be shorter?
Yes, well, it will be a life sentence, and the judge has to set a tariff, a period of time that they'll have to serve. But he has to set that, bearing in mind that they were aged 16 and 17 at the time of the killing. So he is sentencing, effectively, youths. And in this country, obviously, we sentence youths to less than adults. Although they're adults now, they're sentenced as if they were sentenced at the time that the murder was committed.
And the law has changed since the crime was committed.
Yes, lots of laws have changed since the time of this particular murder. We now, of course, they were tried again after one of them was acquitted in the private prosecution. We now have offences that are specifically aggravated in relation to racial attacks. Sentencing has changed so that it is a specific aggravating feature. So the Lawrence case has had a knock-on effect to all sorts of laws.
But the judge has to go back to the period when the crime was committed.
He does. It's not
when he imposes a sentence.
Yes, it's not a mathematical exercise. No sentencing is. The judge has to effectively impose what is the appropriate sentence for 16 and 17-year-old boys, which feels a bit weird when you've got grown-ups in the dock. But obviously that's the way the law works. We have to have some rules, and that's one of the rules, that he has to look at people who committed a crime under the age of 18.
What is the potential range then of sentence, you think?
Well, officially the starting point is 12 years, effectively, and then one has to take into account what we call the aggravating features. So obviously the massive aggravating feature in this particular case is the racial aggravation, the fact that this was a targeted racial attack on a black youth at a bus stop. So the fact is that it's very likely that he will go above the 12-year starting point. Exactly how far?
Well, I was going to say, how high could it go?
Well, the wording, if you like, in the practice direction that the judge has to follow is the appropriate sentence. So it gives him some flexibility to deal with the evidence that he's heard during the course of the trial. So it very much depends on what he's heard, how it's come across to the judge, and the judge doing what he considers to be appropriate, bearing in mind what the rules are.
We're discussing in more detail how society might have changed in the last 18 years. How has the law changed? Has it changed fundamentally since this?
Well, obviously, the examples that I gave you earlier on are the ways in which the law has particularly changed.
What about the big change in the double jeopardy law that came in the past 18 years as well? I mean, will that make it, I don't know, will more cases come to court that have been previously, where previously people have been acquitted because of it?
Yes, because before, if someone was acquitted, that was the end of it. They couldn't be tried again. The law has changed to allow for a retrial on acquittal. So one of these particular defendants was acquitted. He's tried again. He's now been convicted. That's because new and compelling evidence was found. That's the DNA, the fibres, the hair, and so forth. So in particularly serious cases, and there's only certain cases that it can happen, the prosecution can go to the Court of Appeal and apply to retry someone who's been acquitted. You never used to be able to do that, but obviously we now know there are scientific advances. The Lord Chief Justice himself has said, never say never. There are always advances in evidence, and because we recognise that, Parliament debated it and decided that we would have a system whereby we could try people again who had been acquitted.
Felicity Gerry, thanks very much.
Thank
you. You're welcome.
And just after 7 o'clock, we'll speak to a founder member of the National Black Police Association about the impact that the Stephen Lawrence case has had on policing, particularly here in the UK.
At the time, 6:42. This is Breakfast.